Thank you for staying with us. Now, to begin our conversation this morning, part 2 of the autonomy of state judiciary and state legislature, let's take excerpts from part 1 of our discussion put together by Ekene Ndulwe.
When the issue came on issue of autonomy, it had an accelerated passage because all of us agreed at this time that everybody will go back and mobilize his state so that we will have this autonomy. And eventually, it came to pass. The president signed the law. But the problem, like you said, was if you have a new law like this, usually you have conflict in interpretations and also implementation. So the areas that we were disagreeing was on the issue of implementation.
We've been fighting for this autonomy, Section 121, for over 20 years today. So what is this? What is the difficult thing in just obeying a constitutional provision? We just allow it to flow. Then if you have any observation, you can raise it later.
The governors, whether through the governor forum or through their individually, has never ever objected to financial autonomy of the state and the judicial and the judiciary. What they have been saying is that we should look at the peculiarities of the states, and in looking at the peculiarities, you have to look at what is the IGR coming from the states.
We have suggested to the governors that, look, let's have what we call it reducible minimum of what you can give to us, because we know as legislature we pass budget, but the budget may not be 100% actualized. So since budget will not be 100% actualized, let us agree on, we have a houses of 24. Our houses are within 24 to 37, if I'm not mistaken. So we are now looking at how can we make it easy for the governors to implement the financial autonomy.
The governors are scared of implementing this financial autonomy because they still want the legislature to be on the clutches. They still want to be detecting the pest for the legislators. And we said no about that. We want an independent legislature devoid of any interference from anybody. We want a sound legislature. That is one thing. We want a sound administrative, financially independence of the legislature.
All right, those were excerpts from first part of the conversation. And of course, today we have another set of guests who will be doing justice to the subject matter. Let's welcome first Professor Yemi Akinseye George, learned senior advocate of Nigeria, the legal consultant, formerly of Nasarawa State University, Kefi. Professor Akinseye George, delighted to have you with us this morning.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
And we also have joining us from our Makurdi Network Center, if we can get across to him right away, is the former Speaker of the Benue State House of Assembly, Right Honorable David Yohemba. If it's there now, I'm sure. All right, our engineers still trying to get the connection right across to him. But let's begin with Professor Yemi Akinseye George, learned senior advocate. This has become, as it were, one of those intractable issues that we have to confront from time to time. Some persons will say that the otherwise plain provisions of the Constitution become problematic when you are seeking to implement them. This case, financial autonomy for the state legislature, financial autonomy for state judiciary, practices that we already have running at the federal level. We have the unions of the two arms of government, staff unions of the two arms of government, currently on strike for several weeks now. What are your thoughts on this subject matter? Is it just part of typical Nigerian response to not willing to obey laws as they are?
Thank you very much. The issue of autonomy of the judiciary is one of the fundamental principles of democratic governance. We cannot claim that we are running a democracy at any level if you have a judiciary that is dependent on the executive. It is a complete misnomer where judges have to go to the executive cap in hand to beg for meager, the literacy. I said meager because how much is the judiciary asking for? How much? What is the percentage of the budget that is required to fund the judiciary effectively? Very little. All the judges in Nigeria, all judges, are not up to, I don't think they're up to 5,000. All judges. Federal judges plus state judges, high court judges, they're not up to 5,000. In fact, I think I need to get the statistics. They're not up to 5,000. If we do not have an independent judiciary that can protect the rights of the masses, that can deliver justice speedily, that can protect all of us, that can protect the values of democracy, rule of law, rule of law, freedom of expression, right to life. That's why the country is in the mess that we have found ourselves, because we have pauperized and weakened one of the most important departments of government. Look, the executive is political, and by nature, that's what it has to be. The executive is political. The legislative body is political by nature, but the judiciary is supposed to be neutral. It's supposed to be independent. This is a fundamental principle on which democracy and rule of law is founded anywhere in the world, unless we are pretending that we're no longer interested in running a democracy. So how much, that's the question I'm asking the people say autonomy cannot be, financial autonomy for the judiciary cannot be implemented. And that is why the makers of our constitution rightly put in the constitution that once there has been an agreement as to the amount of money that should go to the judiciary, it should not be debated openly. It should go to them. Of course, we should also be interested in how the judiciary itself manages the funds that go to them. We're also interested in that. But the important thing is, are we even giving them the minimum that is required? I'll give you an illustration. Our judges, you are even talking about state level. What if even at the federal level? Judges have been on the same salary for more than 20 years, for 15 years. So if you appointed a judge 15 years ago, a judge who was appointed 15 years ago, and the one appointed yesterday, they'll be earning the same salary. Is that not a misnomer? It's an abuse. It's a demotivation, to these judges. And yet, a lot of them continue to work so hard. A lot of them. Of course, we know there are a few that, that misbehave here and there. And those ones are being dealt with by the NJC. But the ones that are doing their job properly, please, we've talked about this enough. Judges retire. Many of them don't have assurance of retirement accommodation. And you expect them to sit down there and dispense justice without fear or favor, when politicians are busy dangling all kinds of temptations before them. So I think I'm glad that NTA has decided to take up this issue of the judiciary. And judges, unfortunately, cannot speak for themselves. They are not to address the press. You can't bring a judge here to be talking about this issue. So we lawyers are supposed to speak for them. The body of senior advocates are supposed to speak for them. It's supposed to speak for them. The Nigerian Bar Association should speak for them. But we're not doing enough. So I'm delighted you have taken up this issue and you have involved the Attorney General. That's why I thought I would meet the Honorable Attorney General here today. I want to ask, how much is the judiciary asking for? Some judges have retired for years now. They can't access their retirement benefit. They have children too who go to school. They have to pay school fees. They buy from the same market that you and I buy from. So I think that it is important that in the interest of democracy, in the interest of the future of this country, we prioritize the issue of autonomy of the judiciary, particularly financial autonomy. It should not just be a mere statement on paper, that has always been. It's in the Constitution. Judgments have been given. Now we have waited and waited until Jusun had to go on strike. Must we wait for a strike before we do the right thing?
Now, I think you are more concerned about judiciary. We're also talking about the state houses of assembly, who also do not have financial autonomy. But if I may remain with you on the issue of judiciary, you said that judges cannot speak for themselves.
Yes.
Well, of course, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't know why they shouldn't. They don't have NJC, you have NBA. Right, and one would have expected that there should be other means, or backdoor means of ensuring that the judges speak out on this. Because fine, if the NJC and NBA had been speaking on this for a while now, it would have been a difficult thing, to get the state governments to adhere to constitutional provision. Well, right now we had Governor Along of Plateau State sometime on part one of this conversation, where he said that some legislatures do not have a framework for them to be financial to be given financial autonomy. So, what kind of framework are we talking about here? Must you have a framework before you adhere to constitutional provision?
You see, I'm not here to speak with regards to autonomy for the legislature. They are politicians. They know how to sort themselves out. And they belong to the same party anyway. Because they are the political branches. That's not, my concern is with the judiciary. We need a neutral body to moderate. Even the governor, if the executive and the legislature are quarreling, it is judiciary that should moderate, that should settle the fight between them. If legislature, the members of legislative assembly are saying that the governors are not releasing the resources meant for them, the court can intervene. But if we now weaken the courts, we are weakening democracy. We are weakening the country. We are weakening the economy. Because in other parts of the world, one of the ways you rate a democracy that is doing well, one of the ways you rate a country that is doing well is what is called rule of law assessment. And rule of law assessment is at the heart of economic perception, of the perception that other countries will have about our economy. Then, in other words, if we bring our resources to Nigeria and there's financial and there's dispute, can the judiciary protect our interest? They are not so sure, because this judiciary has been impauperized, has been weakened by the executive, by the legislature, by the political branches. So my concern primarily is with the judiciary. In the other day, some houses of assembly voted against financial autonomy. We know that. But the reason they did that is because at the state level, the governors control all the powers. If you are seen to be opposing what the governor wants as a politician, you may not get back, you may not be given that seat. In fact, you may even be impeached. You may even be removed. So because the governors are so powerful at the state level, that's the way the constitution is designed. Unfortunately, that power now makes it impossible for democracy to work at that level, because the judiciary is not independent. So the only way we can strengthen this democracy is to have a judiciary that can call a spade a spade. Look at what happened in some other jurisdictions. I don't like to mention names. When the former president of a particular country thought that because he appointed some judges, he could take a useless matter to them and get the approval. The judges said, no, you can't even come here. You know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. We need to reprioritize our country. The politicians think that all they need to do is to take care of themselves, amass all the resources. No. That's not good enough. You need to build a structure that can last, that can outlive you. And one way we can build that structure is something that's an amendment of, you don't need, this constitution is good. We only need good people, sincere people to implement this constitution. Even all this fight, we are fighting over restructuring and all of that. Of course, we need, reconfiguration. We have too much funds in some places. Some people don't have any money. So these are the things we need to look at. So it's not about individuals. It's not about you and I. The system will outlive all of us. But what legacy are we leaving for future for the future? What legacy are we leaving? What structure are we putting in place? And fundamentally, we need a vibrant, viable, well-resourced judiciary, fearless judiciary. And then, Mr. Kieran, you talk about the NJC. Of course, I agree with you. The NJC also has to assert itself a little more. That's why they are there. The leadership of the judiciary must protect the other judges. They must not just be content with protecting themselves and abandoning their brothers. Because I know heads of court are well taken care of. What are they doing? What is the NJC doing to make sure that other judges who are not occupying administrative positions are also well protected. Their vehicles, their offices, their retirement package, their working conditions, and all of that. So the judiciary itself also has a role to play. They have to assert themselves more because nobody gives you your right. You have to take it.
I'm just wondering, Professor Akinsheye George, there have been at least 3 judicial pronouncements on the issue of autonomy. Yes. There was a case that was taken by Jusun itself to court, another one, 2 others by Olisa Agbakoba, senior advocate. You've had those 3 judicial decisions weighing in favor of judicial autonomy, that's to say financial autonomy. And then you also have now had Executive Order number 10 by President Muhammadu Buhari in May last year, giving teeth, as it were, to the enforcement of the provisions in the Constitution, in particular incorporating aspects of the 4th alteration to the Constitution, now saying that, look, it is not just the judiciary that is financially independent, but also the state legislature. So in spite of this, I mean, what is your reading, for instance, as to why there appears to be the unwillingness to go ahead? I mean, it's not as if, let's face it, that states are necessarily exemplars in development and financial management. Let's be frank.
Thank you very much. I'm very reluctant to say that, or to disagree with the state governors who say they have not got the resources. I was reading a report recently that says that about almost 90% or 90-something% of the resources of a particular state goes into remuneration of personnel. In other words, there's little or nothing left for development. So if you find states that are in that condition, you will expect that even the judiciary will have a lot of challenge in getting the resources that belongs to them. Because what they want to do first and foremost is to keep the system going. In fact, many of them now have said they have not been able to pay salaries. Now, what do we do therefore? It appears that we have too much resources at the federal level. That's the impression I get. And that's why people are clamoring for reorganization. It appears that we need to mop up some resources. If the president says, I've signed the executive order, it should not end there. The president can say, okay, for this order to take off, let us release a special grant of maybe 50 billion. It may not be enough, but as a demonstration of goodwill, as a demonstration of intent. I know at the federal level, it should not be difficult for the federal government to say, okay, now as a demonstration of goodwill, I mean to encourage you guys, Minister of Finance, Governor of CBI, all of you, our judiciary is very important to us. Let us release a special grant of 100 billion to start with. While we are disbursing that, while we are discussing that, we then sit back and say, okay, how are we going to sustain this arrangement? States, what are you going to contribute? Local government, what are you bringing on board? Possibly. There are other financial, LNG, some of these other institutions that contribute to government funding. The president can tell them so it's not sufficient for the president to sign the executive order. I commend that. That's a step in the right direction. And I believe that that's going to be one of the most important legacy of this administration. But if they fail to give teeth to that executive order, then they will not be remembered in good light in the nearest future. So I encourage the executive, I encourage the Attorney General of the Federation, Mr. President, the ministers, please provide the initial fund that is required. The governors, look, after I left, I came for an NTA with the Attorney General the last time. I spoke to some of my friends who are Attorneys General. I was amazed. They told me, look, we too are interested. Some of them, I know some Attorneys General, Ekiti, Nasarawa State, Ogun State, Rivers State, and so on, who are willing to implement this order. But the reality on ground makes it impracticable. So we need the executive, we need the federal level to start off with the takeoff ground, with immediate fund, immediate resources that may be needed. Sir, let me say one more point. The judiciary is better off in Lagos State And we commend the government of Lagos State. This started when the president vice president was Attorney General of Lagos State, and Bola Tinubu was governor of Lagos State. They provided the resources, and that has been sustained. A judge is not sworn in Lagos State until his house or her house is ready. And you know the number of judges you have. How many of them? You can build houses for all of them. It can be done. It's not rocket science. You know, a judge's car is to be replaced every 4 years because we want to insulate them from temptation. We want to protect them as much as possible. In Rivers too, the governor of Rivers State, honestly, I commend that young man. He's the governor. He knows that you cannot have a solid judiciary democracy without a good democracy and a good judiciary. So he too has made sure, even federal judges who are in federal courts, as long as they're from they are indigenous of the state, he's trying to attend to some of their needs. You know, that is very good. But the federal government should not allow a state government to be responsible for the upkeep of its own judges. I think it does not show that we are committed to what we say we will do. But what am I saying? Rivers is doing fairly well. Lagos is doing well. Cross River and Akwa Ibom is doing fairly well. And these are the states that have the highest resources in the country. So I'm saying that it may not be a total refusal by the governors. It may not be a total unwillingness by the states. Yeah, it may have to do with availability of resources. Of funds. It may have to do.
We had the privilege, of hosting the governor of Plateau State on this matter. He didn't actually have much on the issue of lack of resources. He was talking about having a framework so that the independence will be properly monitored. I say this because if you go to states across Nigeria, the state governors, legislators, commissioners, the kind of life that they live cannot tell you that there's no resources in those states. Is it fleet of cars? Is it his houses? Is it the estates being developed and shared among themselves? They're all there. The important thing is this: recognize other arms of government. Whatever share that the state has, give them their own so they can manage themselves. Right. So that is what the question is. And of course, we had also members of JOSON, and PASAN, on this program, and also told the governor, right, that look, what is required is not a framework. What's required is for you to appreciate that every arm of government has the right to have its own funds and manage it by itself. Now, the PASAN is on strike, JOSON is on strike, so work has already been jeopardized in those two arms of government across the nation. So who is benefiting? Now, for the federal government to begin to give palliative to states for them to implement a constitutional provision, for me, is unfounded. It's unfounded. But at this point, we've spoken so much about the judiciary. But now we have in our Makodi studio, Right Honorable David Yohemba. Right Honorable David Yohemba was a former Speaker, Benue State House of Assembly, and also a legal practitioner. Good morning, Right Honorable David Yohemba, and welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning, Nigerians.
All right, maybe you have to start by letting us know what it will look like for the state houses of assembly to be financial, to have a financial autonomy. We've discussed this matter on part 1, and we've, of course, learned a lot of things concerning the state assembly. You were once a former speaker of a state assembly. What is the situation now, or what do you perceive that should take place now that the governor said, look, by May, we are going to commence the implementation of financial autonomy for houses of assembly? What was it like when you were there as the Speaker of the House of Assembly in Benue State?
It was Auckland. The problem that we have is not just the autonomy of the legislature and the judiciary. What we have basically is that the governors strangled the houses of assembly in such a manner that they are cap in hand soliciting for funds from them. And that makes them to detect whatever they want from the houses of assembly. And they want to replicate that to the judiciary. I think the clear wordings, as for the judiciary, the clear wordings of the Constitution, the provisions of Section 81, subsection 3, and Section 121, subsection 3 clearly stipulates the provisions of the Constitution are very clear, and so this should be implemented. It's not a matter of whether the governors will choose which one to obey and which one not to obey. It is not it's a clear-cut situation that the provisions of the constitutions are there, and so nobody can tamper with the provisions of the constitution. It is not for the governor to choose which of the provisions of the constitution to obey and which not to obey. The provisions of the constitution should not and will never be under the whims and caprices of the governors. It shouldn't be so. How would the governors come out to say that we'll start implementation by May? The governors have taken an oath that they will obey the Constitution, and the Constitution is a clear-cut provisions of Section 81, subsection 3, Section 121, subsection 3, and they are clearly in violation of these provisions. In as much as we can appraise the provisions of the Constitution, this a case and a judgment of the court that has not been appealed for over 7 years. The case of Jusum against Attorney General of the Federation and others is unreported though, but it's in FHC, ABJ, I think 667/2013. That case has been there for over 7 years now. It has not been appealed upon. It has not been set aside. So as far as we are concerned, it's a subsisting judgment of the court. It is not for the governors to come out and say like we will start the implementation in May. Minimum implementation. I said there's no sense in it. There's no sense at all. And I think that what the government should do, the federal government, the wordings are clear. For avoidance of doubt, let me read the clear provisions of that section. Section 81, subsection 3. So the amount standing to the credit of the Independent National Electoral Commission, National Assembly, and the judiciary. The amount standing is not for the governors to come out and say, this is what we will give you. No. It goes further. Say, in the consolidated revenue fund of the Federation shall be paid directly to the said bodies, respectively. In the case of the judiciary, such amount shall be paid to the National Judicial Council for the disbursement to the heads of the courts established for the Federation and the states under subsection 6 of this Constitution. So where then lies the powers of the governors to begin to detect whether such amount of money standing for the judiciary or for the National Assembly or for the state houses of assembly will be taken care of from them. It's not from them. It's right from the Constitution. And they have sworn that they are going to uphold the Constitution. They are going to obey the Constitution. That was the oath of office they took. So I think there's no basis whatsoever. And I think the Jusum strike and the demands of the Jusum is not negotiable at all. It shouldn't be negotiated. And so it is not, I repeat, that we must be very careful with the governors of Nigeria. They are gradually destroying the Constitution, and they are destroying the tenets of the democracy. They have sworn in. They have held the Constitution in their arms. They are implementing the Constitution. So why are they choosing which to obey and which not to obey? I think that what the federal government should do is to credit the accounts of the judiciary directly, not passing it through the state governments and state governors to begin to detect whether they will give them such amount of money. So I think that the governors that are doing this kind of thing, I think they should be called to order. It is not fair at all. And I think the Nigerian citizens should sit up to call on their various governors. The president of the Nigerian Bar Association has directed that all branches meet with their state governors, dialogue with them, and see the implementation and how they can bring to an end the Jusum strike. I think some have refused to meet with their branch chairman of a bar association. Others have met though. I think the proper thing to do is for the Federal Ministry of Finance to begin to credit the accounts straight and not passing it through the state governors.
Okay. Right, Honorable David Yamba, thank you very much. Just by the way, the problematic issue relates more to state judiciary and state legislature. But the provision you read out had more to do with the federal government. So perhaps if you went to section 121 sub 3, that would be fine. But that's regardless, because the provisions are impari material, except of course that you label one federal and then the other one state. For the benefit of our viewers, some who may just be wondering, say, look, well, what does this financial autonomy mean? My colleague Kieran asked the question. So look, when you were Speaker of the House, what was your experience like? I mean, you were putting on a cap there. How did you have to go cap in hand, literally as it were, to the governor to run your house? Tell us.
Yes, the autonomy is independent. If you are independent, if your autonomy means you are independent, you can do whatever you want to do. This is a situation where the Constitution, the clear provisions of the Constitution, section 121, subsection 3, which is in respect of state houses of assembly and state judiciaries. And before I answer that question further, let me read section 121, subsection 3. Any amount standing to the credit of the judiciary in the consolidated revenue fund of the state shall be paid directly to the heads of the court concerned. Directly. And so we continue to solicit funds from the state governors, state government, for us to do whatever they intend to do. Renovation of state houses of assembly is taken care of by the house, by the state government. The house cannot do anything. Even our allowances are being held by the executive. Your travels, training, everything is under the dictates of the executive. We don't have anything. It was even so bad as at that time. It was so bad that you see a speaker, most of them, their official cars were so bad. We'll go for speakers conference. You see them, they will not have good cars. Their official cars. It is only when a governor, some will even give you used cars from government house. So take this one and give to the speaker. But if your money, you have your money standing, you can make provisions for new cars, training, travels, seminars, workshops. You will see that you apply to a state governor that you want to do a workshop, or that there's a seminar that needs to be organized. Or even when you want to go on oversight functions, you apply to the governor. He looks at the application. He may decide, if you apply for 100 million, he may decide to give you 50 million. What would you do with it? And it becomes a problem, a huge lot of problems. Members of the state legislatures need their vehicles for their oversight functions. The vehicles will not come. You continue to beg and beg, even those things that are statutorily meant for legislators are not there. You come in your first 28 days, it's not paid. Your furniture allowance is not paid. You are claiming every day at the executive sessions, the members are on your neck as a speaker. Speaker, what is happening? When is our overhead coming? When is our furniture allowances coming? When is this? When is that? When is our accommodation? I think that we need to address this issue, and we must address it forever. Otherwise, we have not started anything.
Well, Kira, I just want this former speaker to respond to this. One would recognize that perhaps there are more substantive issues relating to the powers of financial autonomy at the state legislature rather than some of them that we have just ticked off. I know that this is just by the way of recalling. So we don't have vehicles, we don't have furniture allowance. Oversight is significant. I mean, some persons might argue, well, all of this just relates, most of this rather, tend to relate to the welfare and enjoyment of state lawmakers. And everybody's already complaining about how over-pampered the lawmakers are when you compare the privileges that they enjoy versus what the output is. How would you respond to that? Because some of the things we're just talking about, vehicles and so on and so forth, those are just matters that ordinarily can be dealt with. Although I know that it's a bit insulting to say that you get used vehicles that ordinarily should be boarded and are sent from government house to you at the State House of Assembly.
The truth is, for a legislator who has come in and is working for the benefit of his people, it is incumbent upon the government to take care of him. Aside from those things I have enumerated, oversight functions is very, very important. And it is these oversight functions that the legislators checkmate the executive. The check and balances that has been enshrined in the Constitution, state legislators oversight the executive, judiciary, implementation of the laws, and all of this. When you do not do these oversight functions, you see that commissioners have become overlords unto themselves. Even when there's a need for environment, which has to be resorted to the assembly, they will not even do that. They will provide funds from here to there and whatever that they think they can do. But when these oversight functions are done, they will correct the norms, the ills that the executives are doing. And so sometimes they find it very, very difficult, but you must have a harmonious working relationship between the legislature and the executive so that together you can, achieve a lot in delivering the dividends of democracy to our people. But you will find out that they are not happy that the legislatures are oversighting them. But this is very, very necessary. And that is the first one. And that is the basis, the oversight function of the Nigerian legislature on the executive. You have to do it. And so it's very, very important. So it's not just watching over and seeing that the advantages are only for the legislators. It's for the democracy, democratic virtues to be achieved. And so it is not just looking at furniture allowance and whatever, what you said really is personal to the legislators. But on the whole, we must do things that will uphold the democratic virtues.
All right. Thank you very much indeed, Right Honorable David Iyohemba. We'll come back to you very shortly. But for now, let's return to the studio where we have Professor Yemi Akinse George, SAN. There's something Right Honorable mentioned with respect to what the federal government should do in terms of making direct payment. Making payment direct to the legislator or the judiciary. Is it a possibility, that, considering what the governors, have been doing and their delay, or rather, they are not being interested in ensuring that judiciary gets that financial autonomy, that the federal government could say, okay, well, even with the Executive Order 10 by the federal government, which of course the governor said they did not back, yet they are not adhering to what the Constitution says. Now, is it better now for the federal government to start paying directly to state judiciary?
Thank you very much. I have done some study on this issue, and I like the question that was put to the speaker, that already there is complaint that some legislative bodies are overpampered. You know, speakers who want to enjoy as much paraphernalia of office as the governor. I don't know if you get my point. You know, and we already have a problem at the federal level. And that's impacting democracy because the cost of democracy is already getting too high because of how much money the country spends to maintain our legislators at the federal level, where they have legislative autonomy. Nobody, as of today, there's controversy as to how much our federal legislators earn because they have the power of the purse. They increase their salaries at will, their allowances at will, because they have autonomy. They determine what goes into that purse, you know. Now, but of course, we need a strong democracy. And we cannot have a good democracy without a strong legislative arm. But we have a problem already of abuse of autonomy, of legislative autonomy at the federal level. Because the National Assembly is so strong, even the so-called oversight function has become another means by which you take money through the back door from the executive. Whereas oversight should be a means by which you ensure that there's probity. You ensure that there's compliance with the Constitution. That's what oversight is designed to mean. But it has been hijacked now and turned into another means of enrichment.
In some cases.
Probably not for all the legislators, but a sizable number. At least that's the perception that we get. And we are told that our legislature is the highest paid in the world. That's what we learned. You know? Now, and that's why my own focus has been on the judiciary. The judiciary is the body who should interpret all of these things. The judiciary is the body who should say, okay, legislature, you have overstepped your bounds. This is how it's supposed to be. Executive, you have overstepped your bounds. This is how it's supposed to be. But that same judiciary has now been weakened, has now been pauperized. Now, you talked about release of funding. Our release of funding. Look, the federal government releases judiciary money to the NJC. NJC pays the salaries of state governors, of state judges. State judges. NJC pays their salary. They have no problem about payment of their salary, even though the salary is poor. But their salary is paid because NJC pays. So, you know, and the only agency that can salvage democracy at the state level is the judiciary. Judiciary is weakened. They are not very effective at the state level because their facilities, offices, working conditions, everything depends on the governor. And when the governor is not happy with the chief judge of the judiciary in the state, they don't get anything.
But why is it
so what I'm saying is that
the governors that still appoint judges at the state level?
No,
the governors appoint judges based on NJC recommendation.
Based on NJC,
but in some cases, yes, they don't mind the NJC.
They work hand in hand. They are supposed to work hand in hand with the NJC. But some people are already complaining that in a federal system, why should the NJC, a national body, control the judiciary
at the state level?
But of course, by our own experience, it is necessary. Because by our own experience, although it's anomalous, but we need it in this democracy. Because
at least for now.
At least for now.
If it is anomalous, yes, why do we need it? Because you are talking about constitution.
No, Kira, listen to his explanation.
Federalism takes its character from its environment all over the world. Federalism takes its character. There's no standard federalism. Federalism takes its character from the environment. From what we have seen, the Constitution gives so much powers to the governors, to the political branches, and there are little or no checks at that level. Tell me what is not controlled by the governor at the state level. In fact, that's the problem the houses of assembly have. Because for you to emerge as a member of that house, you need the blessing of the governor. You need the blessing of the party. And the governor is the chairman of the party. So the issue...
He's the leader.
Is the leader of the party.
Is
the leader of the party.
Who is appointed the chairman.
Yes, that is why I'm of the view. I mean, I may be wrong. I mean, I'm not, you know. I'm the view that our focus should be on strengthening the judiciary to be able to implement the Constitution. For example, if we have decided that federal government, if the Constitution says the federal government should pay the salaries of judges at the state level, why should the state government now be asked to be responsible for their overhead and all of that? Put it under the federal government. This is an extreme view. But for now, that may work. Then you made a point about palliatives. I'm not saying the federal government should give palliatives to enable the states to implement the executive order that the president signed. That's not what I said. I said takeoff funding. If you look at the Constitution provides for what is called grants in aid. If the majority of the states are saying we do not have the resources, one, we need to conduct a forensic study. Why don't you have the resources? That has not been done. We need to do an assessment. That has to be done. Secondly, but for the order, because of the for this executive order, it's the president that gave the order. He should back up his order. Should give his order teeth. Release a sizable amount of money for this order implementation to take off, and then, while that fund is being utilized, the framework that the governor of Plateau State talked about can then be put in place. You know, in fact, even if you release the funds to the judiciary, you also have to be sure that the money gets to the judges, so that some bureaucrats within that system don't corner the money.
Well, that's why you have the ICPC and the EFCC. They will have to set up offices. But Prof,
yes.
That's the point that you have raised, and Kirian also wanted you to elaborate on that, namely, the anomalous situation that we have, the NJC superintending the judiciary, as it were, in terms of appointment, in terms of discipline, and then responsibility for their emolument. Now, it then has to do with the facilities and other welfare issues that state governments will take care of. And that has been one of the complaints of some state governors, to say, look, the federal government ordinarily should shoulder this responsibility. Why are you coming to us now, to say you want financial attention, you want to continue to take from the bigger resources that we have at the state level? Wouldn't this require some further tweaking to say, okay, maybe this is what the federal government should now do, not just in terms of what you said, in terms of granting aid, to say, look, 100 billion or 50 billion to enable this takeoff, and then work out the modalities for sustenance. The state governors are complaining, although the counter-argument to that may very well be that, look, if you value this democracy, and democracy has its dividends, you have the resources to be constructing roads, to be building bridges, and of course our road contracts are the most expensive anywhere in the world. So if you have, why wouldn't you then have resources to also provide infrastructure for the judiciary and get them to also have their overheads to run, because they are the bulwark of democracy? What are your thoughts on this? To say, look, okay, what might we do now? State governors, you have a point, but you don't have a full point. But federal government, is it possible for you to say, okay, we can take off some of the burden of funding, say, part of the infrastructure at the state level, if you're not willing at the moment to reduce the quantum of resources you have, which is about 52.5% of the revenue formula?
They correctly said the federal government takes 52-point-something%. And I dare say that there's so much wastage even at the federal level. There's nothing too bad if the federal government says, okay, the president having signed an executive order, take 1%. Just 1% or 2% of that federal allocation. Take care of the judiciary all over the country. It can be done. But are we ready to sit down and do the proper thing? When we budget, we use old templates, not knowing that we don't have the resources anymore. Yeah. Our budgets, are they even realistic? Are the budgets realistic? They're not realistic. Our budgetary system is not functioning well.
Which is why we don't have the 100% implementation.
Absolutely.
Every year.
Do we even have 50% implementation? You put the money there are no releases. Then that should send us back to the drawing board, that this budgetary system that we're using is not working. Already it's in the Constitution, but the legislators are complaining that, look, how much time do they spend there? What quality, what value are the legislative houses adding to this democracy in terms of quality of the output of their work? How many times do they sit in the year? How many times do they sit? It's not about just wearing agbada, wearing babariga, and just gallivanting all over the places saying, I'm a senator, I'm a House of Assembly member. What value are they adding? What qualitative laws? For example, we need laws on government performance. We don't have laws on government performance. This framework that the governor is talking about should come from the legislature. We need a law, for example, on community peace and development to galvanize the resources of this country. There are a lot of resources, but everybody is waiting for allocation to bake to spend, not to bake. it is the function of the legislature to create good laws for a democracy. We don't have the good laws. We don't have a lot of laws that we need for this country to move forward. If the legislature feels that the executive is not doing the right thing, they should sit back, make the laws, and use their, of course, the president has a say in whether he signs such laws or not. But with the support of civil society, with the demand from the media, if the laws are good, the president will have no choice than to sign them. So I'm of the view that it's not just about allocating resources. It's about how do we create more resources. There's nothing wrong if the federal government, to cause this executive order to work, take a little bit of your 52% and release. But of course, don't release to the state governors. I agree with those. Don't release to the state governors. Put a framework in. Of course, if you release to the state governors, it will not get to the judges. It won't get to the House of Assembly. It won't get to the places where the funds are needed. So, but while we are putting that framework in place, that's why I recommended there must be a takeoff fund, which is scientifically determined, which will take this autonomy on for maybe a year or two, you know, the next 1 or 2 budgetary year, where we build the structure to put it, to institutionalize it, to embed it in the system.
That's a good point that he has made, Kingsley, with respect to take-off fund. But I also know that budgets are made on an annual basis by the state governments, and of course they also include the judiciary and legislature in their own state budget. I recall that when the government came into being in 2015, the government gave out bailout funds to all the states, you know, that are owing salaries and areas of salaries, you know. And even after that bailout fund that the government gave, some state governments still owed salaries because they did not really deploy the money adequately to ensure that the salaries are paid. So for some Nigerians, they may argue the fact that it may not be necessary for governments to now dole out some funds for states to implement what is constitutionally provided, because the states also have to run their judiciary and legislature without the federal government being part of it. Okay, for now, let's take a short break. And when we come back, we'll continue with the conversation. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. Stay with us.
All right, you're welcome back, and you're still watching Good Morning Nigeria, and we are reaching you live on the network service of Africa's largest television network, the Nigerian Television Authority. We still have our two guests with us in the Abuja studios here, Professor Akinseye George, Learned Senior Advocate of Nigeria, and from our Makurdi Network Center, Right Honorable David Yohemba, former Speaker of the Benue House. On paper now, former Speaker David Yohemba, on paper, there is the autonomy granted to state legislatures. So the battle has been fought and won. The major issue, of course, relates to implementation. But some persons would argue that perhaps there's still a carryover of the fight. And one of the points that Professor Akinseye George made earlier has to do with the relationship between most state legislators and state governors. That because in a number of cases, the state governors handpicked those who are in the state houses of assembly and even the principal officers who get elected, they seem to just regard them as their appendages, as an extension of government house, rather than seeing them as an independent arm of government that should actuate the checks and balances incorporated into our democratic constitution. And so when now there is this self-assertion to say, look, we want to be financially independent, we want to be financially autonomous, and they are wondering, say, look, where are your progenitors? We brought you there. Why don't you sit where you are? Is there a sense that state legislators have sometimes not conducted themselves in a manner such that governors will feel that, fine, yes, let them get it. Let's play this democracy according to the rules?
Let me quickly say this, that with all due respect to the learned senior advocate, I beg to disagree with him on his comments that legislators are just there wearing Babaniga and all of that. If you say that, other sectors too, you may see the behavior of a lawyer. Some behave as if they are not lawyers. So you don't just make a sweeping statement that this is it. Legislators have made laws that have impacted positively on the governance of this country. Various state governors, some have refused to sign some of the bylaws laws that have been put in place. Legislators are doing very well. They are doing very well. And so for you to just say that, well, legislators are just wearing Babaniga and whatever. So some of the lawyers don't behave like lawyers at all. But they are there. They don't know what to do. They are misbehaving all over. Legislators are doing extremely well, and we must commend them for all what they are doing. For us, we will still canvass the point that there's no point. Don't talk about bailout. There's no bailout here. There's nothing like bailout. Bailout is what has been in place. There has been a shortfall. Then you can come out to bail the situation. Let us start the implementation of the autonomy of the legislature and the judiciary now. There's no any other time that this implementation should start down now. They should start it. And we appreciate that there's need for a legal framework and other nitty-gritty of this thing to be tidied up for the money to begin to come. But this money, the Federal Ministry of Finance must look for a way of sending this money directly to the legislature and to the judiciary. I don't think we need a coercive apparatus for the president to begin to sign Order 10. This is a constitutional provision. He doesn't need that. He needs to implement it. You don't need to begin to compel people, go and do this. No, it is already there. So what we do is for them to implement. The president should direct the Federal Ministry of Finance, work out the framework on how this money can come directly. If we talk about sharing the views of the learned senior advocate, that they are over-pampering, they are doing this, the speakers are living large and all of that. What about the executive governors? Is it not the same thing? There are checks and balances. I don't think that when this money comes, there's no chief judge that will sit on the funds that are coming and misbehave. I expect that he will still be there. I also want to disagree with him on the point that the Federal Judicial Service Commission, who are appointing judges, who are disciplined, these state judicial service commissions that are in place, they are in charge of discipline. If they are doing the recommendation for the appointment to be done by the Federal Judiciary, these appointments can be done at the state level. Once the state judicial service commissions recommends to the governor, he appoints. It does not make any sense that the list comes from the state judicial service commissions, go up to Federal Judicial Service Commission, and then comes back. I think it's a more for us. It's tautology. It's just a waste of time. These people are here. Various high court judges, they are here. They can be disciplined by the state judicial service commissions in their various states if they find anything incriminating against them. I don't think that there's need for us to begin to take on that. The federal judiciary should regulate the appointments at the federal judiciary, while the state judicial service commissions regulates the appointment, discipline, emoluments, and everything of the state judicial officers, and indeed the entire judiciary. That's my view about it, so that we can separate the federal judiciary and the state judiciary from operations. If those funds are coming directly, why pay judges from the consolidated revenue of the federation, and then the money that is meant for their journeys and whatever is being regulated by the state government? Once the budget is put in place, what you need to do is the implementation. The money should come directly to them, and then they have their own budget, seminars, workshops, travels, whatever they intend to do. Renovation of courts. If you go to all the courts, area courts, magistrates, others, you see the conditions where they are sitting. Oh, it's terrible. You want to cry. I had worked with the Benue State Judiciary for 21 years, starting as a clerk, registrar, area court judge, and then magistracy, before I left into private legal practice and then eventually into politics. I know what it is. The present chief judge of the state, I was his clerk of court. I know what they are going through. So all we need to do is for us to look at the framework, and then we were not begging the governors. We're not asking them, this is a constitutional provision. Allow this money to come directly to the heads of this, the heads of court and the legislature. Approve their budgets and let them implement renovation of courts. Do this one, do that one. I went to a magistrate court. I wanted to visit the restroom just for me to ease myself. There was no place. And that is where these judges are sitting. Judiciary is not anchored only on the high court judges. Magistracy, area court judges, and all the supporting staff must be taken care of. If we don't do that, then we have not started.
Thank you so much. Actually, time will not allow us to ask you to answer part of the question that Kingsley, actually posed, because he was talking about the legislators who may not necessarily be interested in having this financial autonomy because of the relationship with their governor. Some of them were handpicked by the governor. Even the officials of some legislative houses were also selected by the governor, and for that reason may not be so inquisitive over having the financial autonomy that we are talking about. But for now, let's get Prof to respond to some of the things you said. You see, he didn't agree with you on some issues. Maybe you have to clarify.
I like the passion of the former speaker, and he's entitled to disagree with me, but I'm speaking from a scientific point of view, not from a political point of view. He's a politician. I'm not a politician. Two things we must agree upon quickly. One, if you needed an executive order to implement the provision of the Constitution, then something is not working. Not all provisions of the Constitution are self-executing. Some of the provisions must be aided, must be nudged, must be activated. That's why we have human beings to implement the Constitution. And that informed the executive order that the president issued. I think it's a step in the right direction. It should have been unnecessary in a saner environment. But in our kind of environment where people do not respect the Constitution often, so we needed that executive order. But the president should not have stopped at the point of just giving an executive order. We should cost the order. What will it cost us? What will it cost the states to implement this order? What is the financial implication of this executive order? How will it impact the budget system? We didn't do that when the order was given, but because the order could not be implemented, this has become necessary. And then, what can enhance the takeoff of this order? What constitutional formula can we invoke? I picked my finger on grants in aid, which will be mutually discussed, scientifically determined, and then these grants in aid should not be released through the state governors. No, because if you give it to the state governors, like you spoke about the money that was given to enable them pay salaries, many of them have still not paid salaries. Yeah. That's point number one. Point number two that I'm trying to make, which I like to be, to see as my summary as we're rounding up, is that the political office holders are overpaid, and it's negatively impacting on democracy. The allowances of the executive, the allowances of the legislature, beginning from the federal, particularly the federal, and it's part of the abuse of the autonomy of that same financial autonomy of the legislature. You sit down, you are pointing money, you are approving your salary, approving your allowances. All the agencies that are supposed to determine have been rendered comatose. Revenue Mobilization, Allocation of Fiscal Commission, Salaries and Wages Commission. All of these agencies are no longer, unlike under the Obasanjo administration. It was Revenue Mobilization, REMFAC. I remember Tuko, that man, I remember, who used to have this issue with Mr. President. on the issue. So if there is no central body that controls, then this power of autonomy may be abused, particularly between the legislature and the executive. That's why I don't like to mix the issue of financial autonomy for the judiciary with financial autonomy of the politicians. The value being added by the judiciary can be seen by everybody. But politicians, the allowance, the amount of money they want to be paid, and you don't blame them also. They are thinking about the demands, the money they have to pay their constituents, the money they have to pay to win another election.
You know, Prof,
yes.
While you are on this point, and just before we wrap up, I hope we have the benefit of returning to Right Honorable Yohemba. What I hear mostly is the money that is the credit of the consolidated revenue of the state should come to the other arms of government, say judiciary and state legislature. I'm just wondering, what level of competence do we have now for budget making in those other arms of government? And when you say money, we have had here, even when the state government or the federal government prepares its budget, approved by the National Assembly in the case of federal, or the state legislature in the case of the state, we do not have, for capital purposes, 100% implementation. So there are always shortfalls. In a state legislature where you have persons being tossed out of their office when there are quarrels over welfare matters, they just impeach a speaker, another one comes. So if you say give it to the head of that arm of government, is it the head strictly, or there is a bureaucracy that will help manage it? Is it the State Assembly Service Commission? Are you going to have a different accountant general for that arm of government? These are some of what is the budgetary committee that you are going to have to harmonize? Because again, even though you are independent, some persons have argued that, wait a minute, a governor is the chief economic manager of the state. So you cannot spend or purport to spend and then put the state into a financial crisis or a financial mess. What are the mechanisms that we can take, so these are matters we still want to put on the table. I don't know who wants to take this between the two of you gentlemen. Right Honorable Yohemba, you want to take this very briefly?
Yes, I want to comment on it very briefly. Just like you said, there's a framework. There's a committee in the House called the House of Assembly Standing Committee, House Services Committee. They are there. Each state has an Assembly Service Commission. They will regulate employment, discipline, and all of that. There's a budget, not that the speaker will sit and begin to appropriate money, take this one, take this one. No. The money, once it comes, there must be a framework on what is supposed to be done. There's a budget that has been approved. The state government has sent in a budget approved by the State House of Assembly for its own money. Not that the state or legislature sit and begin to appropriate money for themselves. No. The money comes in, there's a budget, there's a House of Assembly budget. Now that the Assembly Service Commission have come in, they also regulate. We have our own accountant there. Everything that you think of is there. Director of Administration, all of them are in the Assembly Service Commission. You don't just...
All right, we have to pause it there, Right Honorable, for us to round off this edition of Good Morning Nigeria. We've had a very healthy conversation on this matter, and we know where the problems are now, hoping that the implementation of the financial autonomy will take place in May, as the governors have agreed. So at this point, we'd like to appreciate, first of all, Professor Yemi Akinseye George, SAN, legal practitioner and consultant, formerly of the National State University, KEFI. He is also president of Social Legal Studies here in Abuja. Thank you so much for coming. And the Right Honorable David Yohemba, former Speaker, Benue State House of Assembly, and a legal practitioner. We also want to appreciate you for your contribution this morning on Good Morning Nigeria.
All right, so that's it for the program today. The program returns tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, take care of yourself. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Kyrian Umayo. Do have a great day.